What's going on, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for your advanced look at the latest printing of The Amazing Spider-Man by J. Michael Straczynski Omnibus Volume 1. So, let's get started. And welcome back, everybody. The very first thing I want to do is give a huge thank you to David Gabriel and the folks at Marvel for sending us an advance copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and the book market on May 24th or 25th, depending on where you get your books. And what we're looking at here is the standard edition cover by Jeffrey Scott Campbell. And on the left-hand side, that is your direct market cover. That's the one that's only available through the direct market, so local comic book stores, places like cheapgraphicnovels.com, Walt's Comic Shop, Organic Price Books, Dime Breed Collectors, In-Stock Trades, DCBS. Those kind of places are the only places that you can get that particular cover. Now, let's go back to this one. This is the one that's going to be available everywhere. One of the all-time great Spider-Man writers, absolutely. If you look at my video of where to start reading Spider-Man, this is the one of the places that I suggest start reading Spider-Man. For beginners, and here we have J. Michael Straczynski, John Romita Jr., Mike Deodato Jr. This is the cover to issue number 500 on the spine here. Amazing Spider-Man, JMS, The Artist, Volume 1. And then on the back are all the covers. They're all textless covers too, so you just get the artwork. With the exception of issue number 36. It looks like, I guess they didn't want to just have a black thumbnail there. That is the in memory of the 9/11 issue, which we'll be talking about that here in a little bit. The book retails for $125. So actually, since I have the original printing, I can do this. Compare it to the original printing. This one here was printed at the Donnelly printer. This one here was printed at the iMac printer. One of the things that I'm noticing right away are the richer colors on the original printing. These, not that they're bad or anything, they just look a little bit lighter than these colors here. The yellow is a little more vibrant than the yellow here. And it's usually the other way around whenever I look at an original printing and a new printing. Let's look at the spines here. The spines are the same, with the exception of, I said, like the vibrant color that's lacking a little bit there in the new printing. And one thing I was going to say is that the original printing here only had one cover. There wasn't a variant cover. They weren't doing... not every omnibus was getting a variant cover then. Now it seems like they are. Or sometimes they're getting two variant covers. The back looks identical. It's the exact same price, $125. And the new price is $125. Underneath the dust jacket is an image from Amazing Spider-Man 500. Let's turn this one over so we can look at it underneath the dust jacket. And I love this classic image here. It's John Romita Jr., who is the main artist on the book, showcasing a lot of the villains. As a matter of fact, let's do this. We got to do this image justice. So it showcases a lot of the villains that he's fought through the years, whether they're brand new to the storylines here, like Moreland there, or they're been around since the beginning. So that's an image that you're going to see in here. It's a little bit misleading because, well, let's talk about that. Let's open up the book. We'll do a comparison to the original internal artwork and the pages and stuff. But let's open up the book, look at the art, and talk about this story. Okay, let's get this book opened. You have some black end paper there. The image from Jeffrey Scott Campbell. And The Amazing Spider-Man. You have an image here by John Romita Jr., the writers, J. Michael Straczynski, Fiona Avery, and Sam Barnes. They helped co-write a couple of the issues. The pencilers mainly being John Romita Jr., Mike Deodato Jr. towards the end there. And you also have a classic few pages done by the legendary John Romita Sr. Scott Hanna supplying most of the inks through here. Here's all your letterers, your colorist, and your cover artist. So this is the time when they were experimenting with just a different cover artist for the books at Marvel Comics, and they chose J. Michael Straczynski. So it all kicks off with this particular issue right here, issue number 30 of Amazing Spider-Man. Now it gets a little confusing when they renumber the titles. So you're probably wondering, wait a minute, this book has been around since the early 60s. How is it on only issue number 30? Well, in 1999, they decided to end that particular run of Amazing Spider-Man, cut it off, and start over with a brand new issue number 1. That was in 1999. So now we're into the early aughts, and that's what this is. This is issues number 30 through 58. But then it gets a little more confusing when they start saying, hey, you know what? We miss having all these big numbers for our titles. Let's go back to the legacy numbering system. So they went back after issue number 58. What should have been 59 became 500 to celebrate the 500th issue of Amazing Spider-Man. Cool. So this also collects issues 500 to 514 and issue 509 Director's Cut. The book has 1,120 pages. So the reason I've said that this is a great jumping on point for the character of Spider-Man for new readers is because you don't need to have known anything about Spider-Man. It's all told through here. You can catch up really quick. You eventually know within the first couple of issues, this young man named Peter Parker, at one time in his youth, was bit by this radioactive spider that gave him Spider-Man powers. He doesn't shoot webbing out of his butt, but he shoots them out of his wrist. That's about the only he has spider-like strength. That's it. And the cool thing about this, and a little bit, like I said, misleading, because classic villains don't appear through here. The Green Goblin doesn't come crashing through windows in here. Venom doesn't show up trying to take over his body. You get new characters. And you build on the mythos of a character that had been around, well, at the time for like 50 years, and add to it. You add a mythos. You add this idea of a spider totem, that it was all supposed to happen that way. And you meet this young character here. This old man that's hanging out. He's on a wall. He's just chilling. Let me get to the page here. Yeah, so Peter Parker's up there fighting crime, and he meets this old gentleman that's just hanging on a wall, and he's like, "What's up, Peter?" Peter's like, "Wait a minute, who are you? How do you know my name? How do you have my type of powers?" And this is Ezekiel, who plays a big role, especially in the very first book here, and tells Spider-Man about his powers, that it was not just coincidence, that it was all meant to be, and that he is part of a greater thing. And of course, with something that comes in the light, you get darkness. So you're introduced to the character of Morlun. Now, if you've read Spider-Verse, or if you've read Spider-Man the Other, you know who Morlun is. He's the villain that is like a vampire that feeds on the life force of the spider people. And he's a creepy looking villain. It's this guy right here, who looks all slick with his hair back like that. But he's a creepy kind of vampire character. Now, there are other things that are important about this. This is also the time when Peter Parker and Mary Jane were kind of split up. They were separated. They were still legally married, but they were separated. Mary Jane was focusing on her career, and Peter Parker was being a hero in New York City. So, if you're wondering, like, how did that happen, all of that, and that's a little bit of a long story, but you can find it in the pages before this, and those have only been collected in the Spider-Man by John Byrne, but that's part of the story. The other part is in the Howard Mackie trade paperbacks. It's just called the Next Chapter. I think there's 3 volumes of that, and then you have the Revenge of the Green Goblin trade paperback. All those stories haven't been collected in omnibus format, but you really don't need to have read all of that. It's understood that, these two people are going through a marital issue here. They're separated. That sucks. And Peter feels really strongly for this lady named Mary Jane. And she also has feelings that she's suppressing because she doesn't want to be hurt. Really, I mean, people are smart enough to figure out all of this by just reading this particular omnibus. Here's the big fight with Morlun, and we do have to talk about this. So, this also changes the dynamic between two characters. I've talked about Mary Jane, but I also have talked about Aunt May. Now, there's something important that happens through here, but I have to talk about it so you can kind of get an idea of what their dynamic is in this particular volume. If you don't like any spoilers, then by all means, skip ahead. I'll put the timestamps in the description of the video, where to skip, where I'm talking about the non-spoiler stuff again. But if you don't mind spoilers, or you've read this stuff over and over again, then stick with me. All right. So, what happens in here is that Spider-Man gets into a huge fight. His costume is destroyed through this fight, and he comes home beat up. And when he gets home, all beat up, Aunt May finds him laying there with the costume. I mean, this is a huge, probably the biggest cliffhanger in Spider-Man history for people that were reading this monthly. But you had to wait another month to find out what was happening, because the following month, something horrible happened in the United States, and it shocked the world. And that is 9/11. So, I wasn't getting comics at the time. This is when I was taking a break, and I started coming back with new X-Men, and then eventually Astonishing. But I did go and get this issue. My buddy Dennis called me, and he was like, you gotta go and find a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 36. And I had the same issue that you all had. Like, what do you mean 36, dude? They should be up in, like, the 500s now. And he's like, just trust me. So I went to a local comic book shop at the town I was living in, and they had a couple of copies left. So this was Marvel's way of handling the horrible events in New York City that happened because of 9/11. And Marvel has always been one of those universes that, you know, it's been called the universe outside your window. These places aren't made up like Gotham City or Metropolis or Star City. These are real places they live in. They live in New York City, the Great Lake Avengers. I don't know why I went there, but they felt like it was their responsibility to react to the events that happened in 9/11. Now, I had taken a break from comics, and part of the reasons why I took a break from comics is because I didn't think the writers understood a lot of these characters. But in one damn page, in one damn panel, I was like, oh my god, somebody understands the complexity of Doctor Doom. And that is right here. When, you know, you have the Juggernaut, Magneto, Wilson Fisk, and Doctor Doom. Just there's Doc Ock, sorry. Looking at just the ruins of what happened to the Twin Towers. And then you get some nice dialogue. You can read it yourself, but you get this shot right there. Now it's like, yeah, thank you. There's a lot of people, you know, at the time I was leaving comics, were writing these characters as one-dimensional villains that it just got old after a while. There wasn't that complexity to characters like Doctor Doom or Magneto. And even when Magneto and Doctor Doom were coming back, it was always some silly story. And I thought, man, whoever this JMS guy was, I didn't know who JMS was. I didn't watch Babylon 5 at the time. I was like, yeah, that guy gets it. So you do get the next following issue there. I thought this was a beautifully done issue. I think some people have issues with the fact of Peter talking to Aunt May and how all of this came about and some of the dialogue. I thought it was perfect. I thought it was a beautiful relationship between the person that raised him as a mother and, you know, the son that was trying to keep her safe, trying to keep this part of his life out of hers. I thought this was done so classy and so well. I mean, I could go on about these stories. There are reasons why I say this is a great jumping on point for Spider-Man. It matures the character a lot. Alright, so let's get to the non-spoilery part. So you got Mary Jane living her life over there in California, flying everywhere, going to world premieres. This is the Nuff Said issue right here. I love this where Aunt May's complaining to the Daily Bugle, threatening to cancel her subscription to the Daily Bugle. The other thing that is really cool about this is, you know, a lot of people that have watched the movies or the TV shows or the cartoon are used to Peter being a photographer and then selling his photos to the Daily Bugle. Well, that's no longer the case here. Now he goes and becomes a teacher. And I love that. It's like he is changing. He's maturing in his life. And just like I was, you know, I was in a different time in my life when I was rereading or reading these issues for the first time than I was when I left Spider-Man in my youth. So I thought that was really cool. I'm like, oh man, Marvel is really making the characters grow up. Now, there are a few guest appearances, one of them Doctor Strange, which has big ramifications for a storyline that happens later, but I'm not going to go into that. That's a huge spoiler for Volume 2. You can watch my overview of that. You know, he's teams up with Doctor Strange. We have a new Dr. Octopus. And remember when I said we don't have classic villains? We do have the return of a couple here and there. Little Easter eggs. Here's the return of classic Doc Ock, who fights the new Doc Ock. And I love the fact that they look at, he looks at Aunt May and he's like, May! And she's like, oh, well, Otto! We have new villains, though. This is Chantra, who escapes a dimension that Peter was in when he was with Doctor Strange, and she comes over to our world. And then we also get Digger eventually. You can find out what happens to the relationship between Peter and MJ there. Yeah, this is the character of Digger, who's a new character that appeared through these pages. So see what I mean? Even the villains you don't need to have a lot of knowledge for. Let's talk about issue 500, though, because that's one of my favorite issues. But before we get there, I did want to say that the covers are framed out. They're textless, but you can tell which cover you're on because they tell you. There are no credits within the issues. All the credits, like I showed at the very beginning here, are right here in the credits page. They tell you who drew what, who colored what. Because there's also no page numbers. Here's the big fight with Dormammu. So there's a couple of team-ups there, which all leads to issue 500. And I thought this was such a great celebration of Spider-Man's 500th issue. So Spider-Man is lost in space and time, and he is having to relive a lot of his most defining moments. So you're going to find things in here from, Amazing Spider-Man number 15, right? The classic issue. From Amazing Spider-Man number 2, number 4, number 9, number 11. Just the first fights, how he dealt with these villains, and, his biggest defeat. Of course, you're going to find here from the If This Be My Destiny storyline, which is, to me, one of the best stories that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko ever did for Spider-Man. His defeats in issue number, 121, all that with the Gwen Stacy. And then this image right here. I love this. This is so cool. So you do get the newer characters through here, like Chantra and Digger and Moreland. But you get classic villains, too, that he's fought throughout the decades. Thought that was cool. Now, this is John Romita Jr. This happens to be my favorite John Romita Jr. art. This is when Scott Hanna was inking his artwork, so it's less blocky, it's a little more defined. I thought this is, to me, is when John Romita Jr. had this art style that I'm like, I really hope he ends up just using this art in his next run. Now, that really depends on the inkers, right? I thought it was a beautiful matchup between Scott Hanna and John Romita Jr. Here's a team up with Loki. This was collected in a Loki little mini-series. I didn't talk about the gift in issue number 500. That damn thing brings a tear to my eye, so you can find out what I mean when you read issue 500 for the first time. And then eventually we get John Romita Jr. He ends up leaving, and we get this new artist right here, who is no stranger to Spider-Man or Marvel Comics, and that is Mike Deodato Jr. And he kicks off his run with one of the most controversial stories that has ever been in the pages of Spider-Man, and that is since passed. He does use a lot of actors for references, like this is Robert De Niro. He will also he'll use Tommy Lee Jones for a creepy panel here for a specific character, but that's too much. So we have two mysterious masked villains that show up. They have similar powers to Peter Parker when he is visiting the grave of Gwen Stacy. And that's pretty much the mystery. He's trying to figure out what is going on. Who are these people? And what connections do they have with him? What connections do they have with this letter that he got from Gwen Stacy? And she's been dead for a long time. And how is it all related? You can judge it for yourself. So that's the last I will say about that. Let's look at the extras. All right, we have a sketchbook here by Jeffrey Scott Campbell. He had a story. There was a comic that he was going to do with Jeff Loeb, and that was supposed to be in 2007. I don't think it's coming out. Some cover ideas. Introduction by Axel Alonso for Best of Spider-Man. Those are the hardcovers. So this has been collected before in hardcover format, oversized hardcover format. I think I did an original overview of this years ago when it came out. Wow. I have officially forgotten. Oh, this is really cool. I forgot about this. So in Amazing Spider-Man 500, Peter Parker relives some of his defining moments. This is awesome. They tell you what issues and what panels they came from. That's awesome. There's Amazing Spider-Man 4 with the fight with Sandman. Number 2, number 6. Yeah, this is great. Okay, better skip some of that in case there are spoilers. And then since past, you get the breakdown of the panels and the script. We don't want to spoil that for anybody. And you get some covers all the way in the back here. As far as the binding of the book, it is sewn binding. Here is what the eye looks like. So with 1120 pages and that type of eye, got a little bit of a gutter curve. So you are going to have a little bit of gutter loss. So for those spread pages towards the beginning and towards the end, you're going to have some gutter loss. Now, this, when I was rereading it, uses the same thin glossy paper that was found in the pages of the Kurt Busiek Conan Omnibus. So you can see some of the art come through, especially on the whites. Let's look at, there's an actual white splash page that they do like on the opposite side of the cover sometimes. Yeah, like this. So you can see some of the art from that cover come through. Now, this is right now both of my LEDs and a third LED over here. So you have two LEDs pointing at the book and one coming down here. So, that's a lot of light. But I noticed that when I was reading it upstairs on my couch, compared to the first printing, printed at the Donnelly printer here, the original printing, it's more noticeable in this than this. I mean, it wasn't like they were using the thickest paper at the Donnelly printer then either, but this is significantly thinner than this paper. Let's look at a couple more pages. This time I wanted to focus more on the colors. So even the internal colors, yeah, they're a little bit lighter in the new printing than they are in the original printing. And like I said, usually when I've done overviews and comparisons of these, it's usually the other way around, where the new printing has richer colors than the original printing. But just comparing a couple of more pages here. This is the fight with Morlun. And of course I had to compare the spread pages. You can see the way the original one lays over and the new printing lays over. And just one more comparison between the original printing and the new printing. Yes, you could see some of the panels bleed through here on the white from the original printing, but you could see it a lot more in the new printing. So, but that's it. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this latest printing, don't forget to check out our sponsors. CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. If you live in Europe and are interested in pre-ordering or purchasing Omnis, then you should definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices for Marvel and DC big books within the EU. Flat shipping of €9.90 for EU countries. Extremely careful and sturdy packaging. Emails are answered within 24 hours. And they have a superb selection of new releases and out-of-print books on their website. Just head over to waltzcomicshop.com for more great deals and rare titles. And for a limited time, you can use the code NEARMINTCONDITION, all one word, at the checkout for free shipping to all EU countries with your first order. Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for Omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Let me know in the comments down below if you are picking this up, which cover you're going to get, if you missed out on it the first time. If you've read these stories, what you think about this particular run of Spider-Man. And more importantly, what other Spider-Man runs would you like to see in omnibus format? This was the Uncanny Omar. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications to let you know when our videos are going live. We are on Spreadshop and Patreon. Amazing ways to support the channel if you can do so. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.